The main focus of this channel is always going to be handhelds, but the way we play those handhelds has been changing, and every now and then we find a peripheral so good we just have to talk about it. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to cover the 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller and why it might just be the perfect pairing for all your retro games, no matter where you play them. Handhelds, consoles, PC, wherever you want to do it, this might just be the best option for you to really enjoy those games outside of a portable handheld. I've had the Xbox Ultimate wired controller for a few months, and as soon as I got my hands on it, it became my favorite controller. I've been using that on the PC for a few months, and now it was time to upgrade my Switch Pro controller. That poor thing seems better days. The 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller was just a perfect upgrade. Since I already fell in love with the Xbox wired controller, this is just a perfect fit for me. I really think 8BitDo makes the best controllers on the market because they give you all of the modern conveniences while still showing respect for the classics, especially with that amazing D-pad. So after using it for a little while with my Switch, my Steam Deck on PC, I think it's time I share my thoughts on it and tell you why I think it's such a great controller. Even though this is marketed as a Switch Pro controller, you're still going to be able to use this on PC, Steam Deck, Android devices, anything in both X input and D input. So don't worry about it being just limited to your Switch, or if you're going to have to go through a lot of configurations to make it work. It's really going to be plug and play, since most devices are going to recognize it as either X input or D input. When using it on the Switch, I just used a Bluetooth connection, and when I was using it on my PC or Steam Deck, I was using a 2.4 gigahertz connection. The benefit of that is as soon as it connected to those, the device just thought it was an Xbox controller, so there was no issue with connectivity, and the button layout was exactly as it would be if I was using an Xbox controller, which is great because when I'm playing those games, I'm used to that layout. I'm not usually looking at the buttons and trying to figure out what to be pressing. I'm just going to be reacting to what I already know is supposed to be there. Same thing for the Switch. When I'm playing a Nintendo console, I already know where A and B are going to be, so I don't have to think about it. That was a very pleasant surprise when I first plugged it in, because I thought I was going to have to go through remapping and it was just going to be a hassle, but it wasn't. It was very much just plug and play. So great thing about that is you can keep that dongle on your PC or your Steam Deck dock and just use Bluetooth connection for the Switch if you want to have both of them and you don't want to go through a lot of configuration. So now let's talk about what comes with the controller. So you're going to want to get familiar with is going to be the 8BitDo Ultimate software. Here you can pick between Switch and Windows and adjust all the button mapping, create macros, change how the sticks work, how the triggers, all of that. So the first thing you can do here is actually remap the buttons. So if you want a certain button to do something else, here's where you would go and change that. You can also create profiles here so that each profile is going to have a different layout. Let's say you were doing something like emulating GameCube using this controller and you wanted Y to be a different button so it's easier to hit it when you're playing something like F-Zero GX. You'd be able to adjust that there and keep a profile just for that. Next up, sticks. Here you can see in real time how the stick is moving, where the dead zones are, adjust them, all that good stuff. Here you can adjust your triggers and how long it's going to take for that press to register as an input. You can have it be an immediate response, or you can give it a full pull. That's going to be completely up to you. And again, you can create this based on profiles. So if there's certain games where you want a very quick response, you can be able to set that. Or if there's other games like racing games where you want it to behave differently, you're going to be able to adjust all those things in this part. Next up is rumble. Just like the analog triggers, you're going to be able to adjust the intensity of the rumble here, and it's great because you can actually pick it on each side. If for whatever reason you wanted one side of the controller to vibrate more than the other, you can be able to do that here. And the last thing here is macros. So if you wanted to create a certain macro input, let's say for something like Hades, if you wanted your dash and attack to be all working at the same time with one button, you'd be able to create those here. So thanks to the software, this controller is incredibly customizable and it's going to be exactly how you want it to be. As long as you take the time to learn it, it's not a very difficult software to use. It just takes a little bit of playing with it so you can kind of get a feel for what everything is and how all the inputs work. Up next, let's talk about the dock, and it has a very simple but elegant design. On the bottom, you have a rubber pad that keeps it from sliding around. Also, you're going to find a little compartment down there for the USB dongle. The great thing about this is that USB dongle actually has a pass-through connection, so while your controller is charging, it's also going to be connected all the time. So as soon as you pull it off, you can have a connection and it's going to be ready to go. On the bottom, you're also going to have this little light up bar that's going to light up whenever the controller is connected, and you should be able to get about 15 to 20 hours of game time out of the controller per charge. But battery life's never really been an issue, because as soon as I'm done, I just drop it in the dock and it's good to go for the next time I grab it. So as long as you keep remembering to put it there when you're done using it, battery's never going to be a problem. Up next, let's start with the comparisons. And first up, we're going to talk about the ergonomics between the 8BitDo controller and the Xbox controller. Now, they are very similar, but the shape of them is a little bit different. The 8BitDo controller is a little bit more rectangular, so a little bit more straight angles, while the Xbox controller angles out a little bit more. And if I'm being completely objective, I gotta say the Xbox controller is just a little bit more comfortable when you first grab it. As far as the buttons go, both controllers have what seems to be the same buttons, about the same height, same press, but the 8BitDo controllers are a little bit quieter. The Xbox ones just feel like they're clicking into more of a hollow shell. I'm not really sure how to explain it. D-pads, they couldn't be more different. 8BitDo uses a more classic Super Nintendo style D-pad, which I absolutely love, and the Xbox controller is probably the clickiest thing I've ever used. Triggers, they're going to be very different, but both are very comfortable to use, so no real complaints there either way. Up next, we have the Switch Pro controller, and this is my most used controller. The 8BitDo is my favorite, but the Switch Pro is my most used one, as you can probably tell just because of how beat up it is. Now, as far as the build, they're going to be very, very similar in shape, but I guess 8-bit do what Nintendo don't. Anyway, out of those, the Xbox controller is still the most comfortable, but not by as much as you would think. As far as the feel of both devices go, the 8BitDo controller is a little bit grippier versus the Switch Pro controller, but both are very, very similar. As far as the D-pad goes, they are still very different. The Switch Pro controller D-pad is a lot stiffer and clickier. It doesn't make a loud noise, but it's still just harder to press. Overall, not the best D-pad. Plus, I had to go in and mod it with some tape because I was getting some weird inputs, something I still haven't gotten with the 8BitDo controller. As far as the triggers goes, you have analog, Switch Pro doesn't, so that's going to be a win for 8BitDo. Up next, we have the DualShock 4, and this is a very comfortable controller, and unlike the other ones, this one's going to have a bottom stick placement. 8BitDo also makes a very similar controller, but we're not really going to focus on that right now. Both of these do have similarities though, and one of them is going to be that D-pad. Both are using a Remember D-pad, except the PlayStation 1 uses a much more mushier D-pad. The 8BitDo D-pad just feels much more precise, even though it is still a Remember D-pad. The part where they do look very, very similar is actually going to be those shoulder buttons. Both are using the same layout and they're about the same size, and the feel is also very similar. Up next, we have to talk about the sticks, and this is a definite win for 8BitDo. They're using Hall sensor sticks, which means there's magnets inside of the housing that actually measure the movement instead of having actual parts rubbing against each other. So what that means is you're not going to develop stick drift. The great thing about that is that if you do go with this controller, you're going to be set for a very long time, and you're not going to have to worry about your sticks going out before the controller actually starts to wear out. Between these two, the sticks on the 8BitDo controller feel a little bit tighter, a little bit more precise. The sticks on the Xbox controller are great, but I will give it a little bit of an edge to the 8BitDo controller. Up next, we have the Switch Pro Controller, and even though the sticks on the Pro Controller do feel good, unfortunately, they, at least in my experience, are the most prone to drift. This is the only controller that I have that actually has stick drift, and it's also the most used one, so that might have something to do with it, but it's a problem Nintendo has been dealing with, and not in the best way. Generally, 8BitDo is just going to feel better, and it's going to be better sticks. Up next, DualShock 4, and no real complaints with these. They're worn out, unfortunately. This is a controller that I've had for a long time. Next to my Switch Pro controller, it's gotten the most use. You can see all the wet residue around the stick itself. That's unfortunately just plastic rubbing with plastic, and only more of the Elite controllers have the anti-friction rings to stop that, so it's a pretty common thing. But in general, the sticks on the DualShock 4 are very good. I just still prefer the Hall sticks and the 8BitDo controller a little bit more. The 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller offers a lot, and you would expect that, being that this is their most premium offering. There's a 2.0 GHz option that's a little bit less expensive, and also a wired version for your Xbox that's gonna cost even less than that. But if you're in the market for a new controller, you might as well go for the top end. With the Ultimate software, you're going to get a lot of customization that you're not going to get in a lot of other controllers, and you're going to get first party level quality. All of this at a very reasonable price, especially when you compare it with some of the more expensive offerings on the market. Coming at $69.99, it's a very compelling package for an all-around controller that's going to work on basically anything, from your Android handhelds to your Steam Deck to your retro handhelds to your Switch. Basically on anything you want to use it, you're going to be able to use this controller. Now, I'm sure you're going to have your favorite, and you might argue that an Xbox controller is a better deal, but in my personal opinion, 8BitDo has the best option in the market, and if you're in the market for a new controller, please consider it. If this video was helpful to you, if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you on the next one.